For Otaniyen, Christmas was always a reminder of what she didn't have: the newest phone, the designer clothes, the admiration of her family. This year, she made a choice to fit in, to be just like her cousins. But when the price of those achievements leads to a horrifying discovery, she's forced to confront what's more important: impressing others or saving herself. This Christmas, Otaniyen's journey will make you rethink everything you've ever done to measure up. Welcome to African Tales by ChiNwa, breathing life into African tales. Otaniyen had always been the picture of grace and simplicity. At just 20 years old, she had the kind of beauty that made heads turn without her even trying. She was easygoing, well-liked, and had a knack for making friends wherever she went. But no matter how many friends she had, there was one thing that always bothered her: her family's yearly Christmas tradition. Every December, her parents, who lived in Abuja, would pack their bags and take the long drive to Benin, their hometown. It wasn't just a casual holiday, it was the family ritual, a time for everyone to gather, catch up, and celebrate the holidays. For Otaniyen's parents, it was the only opportunity each year to reconnect with relatives who lived both nearby and abroad. For Otaniyen, it was a bittersweet affair. The extended family was huge, filled with uncles, aunts, cousins, and distant relatives from all corners of the world. People came from different cities, towns, and even different continents, filling their childhood home with laughter, conversation, and stories of what life had been like outside their small village in Benin. But to Otaniyen, these gatherings were more like a competition. Every year, her cousins would show up with the latest iPhones, designer clothes, and money to burn. They walked in with their heads held high, oozing confidence, flashing their new gadgets, and flaunting expensive gifts they'd bought for their parents. It was always the same story. Her cousins, who lived in cities far bigger than Benin, seemed to have it all together, living the high life while Otaniyen felt like an outsider in her own family. She had never been one to care much for material wealth, but the annual trips to Benin made her painfully aware of what she lacked. Her cousins' designer clothes and luxury items were a reminder of what she didn't have. It wasn't just their wealth that bothered her. It was the way they made her feel, like she didn't belong. Their casual comments about how they could afford anything they wanted made Otaniyen feel like an odd duck, as though her modest life in Abuja wasn't enough to keep up. And so each year, she would spend the Christmas holidays watching, trying to ignore the sting of comparison as she exchanged pleasantries with relatives who had no idea how much she envied them. She loved her family, but those trips to Benin made her feel small. As the weeks ticked by and Christmas approached once again, Otaniyen began to feel that familiar knot in her stomach. The thought of traveling to Benin made her heart race with dread. She wasn't ready to face her cousins again, not with her plain phone, her simple clothes, and her growing sense of inadequacy. This year, she decided, it would be different. If she didn't show up with the same swagger and wealth as her cousins, she wouldn't go at all. It was her final decision. She had made up her mind. This Christmas, she would be on par with them, or she wouldn't go. But how? How would she afford the new phone, the designer clothes, the money to show off? That's when the idea hit her, almost like a whisper in the back of her mind, promising a way out of her misery. It was a dangerous path to take, but at that moment she didn't care. Desperation was beginning to take hold. As the days grew shorter and Christmas edged closer, Otaniyen's obsession with meeting her cousin's expectations intensified. Every conversation seemed to be a reminder of how far she was from the image she desperately wanted to project. The pressure of it all became unbearable. Her cousins in Benin were always so effortless in their wealth. Whether it was the latest iPhone, the newest designer bags, or their shiny new cars, they wore their success like a badge of honor. They had the kind of lives that Otaniyen had only seen on social media and in magazines. They were always at the hottest parties, traveling to exotic destinations, and posting glamorous photos for everyone to envy. It was the kind of life Otaniyen dreamed of, but one that felt so far out of reach. What hurt her the most wasn't their wealth. It was how easily they slipped into their lavish lifestyle without even a hint of effort. And Otaniyen? She was constantly struggling to keep up. Her parents weren't poor, but they were far from rich. Her father worked a stable job in Abuja, and her mother ran a small business. There was always enough to get by, but never enough to flaunt. The reality of this made Otaniyen's yearning even more painful. She knew her parents loved her, and they would do anything for her. But material wealth was never their focus. They taught her to value things that couldn't be bought, like family, love, and integrity. But in that moment, none of that seemed to matter. All she could think of was how much she needed to have what her cousins had to finally be seen as an equal. The final straw came a week before Christmas, when her boyfriend, who she had been trying to keep happy with the promise of a better life, broke up with her. He had always been a source of reassurance, someone who told her she was beautiful and deserving of the best. But that week, he had grown distant, barely responding to her texts or calls. When they finally spoke, he told her he couldn't keep up with her demands and the pressure of her constantly seeking more. The breakup shattered her. She felt like her world had come crashing down. In the midst of this turmoil, Otaniyen realized just how desperate she had become. It wasn't just about impressing her cousins anymore. It was about finding a way to fill the emptiness inside her, to prove to herself that she could be someone important, someone worthy of admiration. She had to show up to Benin with the same swagger and confidence as her cousins. With her self-esteem at an all-time low, she began to spiral. The question gnawed at her. How could she afford the life she wanted? How could she step into that world where money wasn't a problem and everyone admired you for your wealth? The answer came to her like a bolt from the blue. She remembered a conversation she'd overheard months ago, a discussion about women who got money and gifts from wealthy men in exchange for their company. At first, she had dismissed the thought, thinking it was too extreme. But now, with nothing to lose, she searched online and found exactly what she was looking for. A platform called Christmas One Night Stand, where men were willing to offer money and gifts for a single night of company. It sounded too good to be true, but desperate times called for desperate measures. With trembling fingers, Otaniyen signed up, hoping this would be her ticket to the life she dreamed of. She couldn't afford to waste time. Christmas was just around the corner. The more she thought about it, the more appealing the idea became. Otaniyen was aware of the risks, of course, but the allure of the money, the gifts, the new iPhone, everything she needed to make a splash in Benin, drove her to ignore the warning bells in her head. Within minutes of signing up, she was flooded with messages from men offering to buy her anything she wanted, from clothes to jewelry. But one message stood out. A man named Dr. Onyema Onwudinjor. His message was direct and offered exactly what she had been hoping for. "Let's meet. I'll give you everything you want. The latest iPhone, clothes, money. Just one night." Dr. Onyema's words were enticing, and the promise of designer clothes and the latest iPhone sent a rush of excitement through Otaniyen. This was it. This was her ticket to entering the world she so desperately craved. No more second thoughts. She quickly agreed to meet him, her mind already imagining the shopping spree and the luxury that awaited her. In her desperation to escape the constant pressure to fit in, she had found a way out. The night before their meeting, Otaniyen barely slept. She was consumed with anticipation, counting down the hours until she would finally have the things she felt were missing from her life. All her insecurities, her fears of not measuring up, would disappear the moment she stepped into Dr. Onyema's world. The next morning she would be transformed, but she had no idea how quickly things could spiral out of control. The night Otaniyen met Dr. Onyema on Wooden Jaw, she was a bundle of excitement and nerves. She had never done anything like this before, but the promises of wealth and luxury clouded her judgment. She told herself it would only be one night, just one night of compromise, and then she could walk away with everything she had dreamed of. She met him at a cozy bar in Abuja, a dimly lit place where soft jazz played in the background. Dr. Onyema was just as he had described in his messages, charming, elegant, and well-dressed. He had an air of confidence that made her feel small, yet strangely important. He greeted her with a smile, his deep voice warm and inviting. Without wasting time, he led her to a table and immediately ordered a bottle of wine. His conversation was smooth, effortless. He seemed genuinely interested in her life, asking about her ambitions and dreams. Otaniyen found herself relaxing under his attention, the tension of the past few weeks slowly melting away. And then it happened. Dr. Onyema slid an envelope across the table. She opened it, revealing a brand new iPhone, gleaming and wrapped in its pristine box. "Consider this a gift," he said with a smile. "You'll have everything you need to feel complete." Otaniyen's heart skipped a beat. This was exactly what she wanted, the latest phone, a symbol of status, of power, of belonging. It was more than she could have hoped for. She felt a rush of gratitude, even though a small part of her knew that there was something unsettling about the whole situation. But the excitement of the moment overshadowed any doubts. They left the bar shortly after, and Dr. Onyema drove her to his bungalow on the outskirts of town. His house was like something out of a dream, cozy, comfortable, and impeccably furnished. Otaniyen felt a sense of awe as she stepped inside, her mind racing with thoughts of what the night would bring. She couldn't wait to see her cousins' faces when she showed up in Benin with the new iPhone, the designer clothes she was about to get, and the wealth that seemed so effortlessly within reach. The night with Dr. Onyema on Wooden Jaw was everything Otaniyen had hoped for, at least on the surface. He was kind, attentive, and showered her with the attention she so desperately craved. The atmosphere was intoxicating. She was no longer the girl who struggled to fit in. In that moment, she felt like she belonged. Dr. Onyema had promised her the world, and he delivered. After a delicious dinner and several glasses of wine, they spent hours talking, laughing, and getting to know each other. His company was so engaging that she began to forget the unease she'd felt earlier. Dr. Onyema was not only wealthy, but charming in a way that made her feel like she was the most important person in the room. For once, Otaniyen wasn't the outsider. She was special, desired, and admired. When the night grew late and the conversation turned more intimate, Dr. Onyema offered her a private tour of his house. His bungalow was more than just a home. It was a sanctuary, a place that felt safe, secure, and full of possibilities. Otaniyen marveled at the tasteful decorations and the luxurious touches everywhere she looked. This was the kind of life she had dreamed of, and it was all within her reach. They moved to the guest room, a space that felt like a quiet retreat from the world. Dr. Onyema made her feel comfortable, pampered even. Everything about him seemed to be designed to put her at ease. She felt herself growing more and more relaxed, her earlier anxieties slowly fading away. This was the price she had to pay for the life she wanted, she told herself. One night, just one night, and then she would have everything, the phone, the clothes, the status. After the encounter, Otaniyen couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. She had done it. She had gotten everything she wanted, and for a fleeting moment, she felt powerful. Dr. Onyema had given her the iPhone, the designer clothes, and the promise of more to come. She was walking on air, giddy with the thought of showing off to her cousins in Benin. But as she drifted off to sleep in his plush guest room, there was a nagging feeling in the back of her mind, one she couldn't quite shake. She had crossed a line, and for all the luxury she now had, she couldn't escape the creeping suspicion that something wasn't right. Little did she know, the worst was yet to come. Otaniyen awoke with a start, her heart pounding in her chest. For a moment she lay still, trying to orient herself. The soft luxury of the guest room was gone. She wasn't in Dr. Onyema's bungalow anymore. Instead, she found herself lying on cold, damp earth. The sharp chill of the morning air cut through her, sending a shiver down her spine. Her first thought was that she had fallen asleep somewhere else, perhaps outside on a balcony or garden. But as her senses sharpened, the grim reality of the situation hit her. She scrambled to her feet, frantically checking her belongings. Her handbag was still beside her, and the iPhone Dr. Onyema had gifted her was firmly in her grasp. Her clothes were the same, but something was very, very wrong. She was in a graveyard, surrounded by tombstones, the ancient weathered stones jutting out of the earth at odd angles. Her heart thudded in her chest as her gaze landed on the gravestone directly in front of her. The inscription chilled her to the core. R.I.P. Dr. Onyema Onwudenjo, 1930 to 1995. The realization hit her like a slap. She had slept with a ghost. Otaniyen's breath caught in her throat. She blinked, unsure if this was some kind of bizarre nightmare. But no, she felt the cold earth beneath her, smelled the dampness of the graveyard. It was all too real. Her stomach twisted in fear as she stumbled backward, her pulse racing. She tried to scream, but no sound came out. Her throat was completely dry and her vocal cords felt strangely tight, as if they were no longer functioning. Panic surged through her. She tried again, but all that emerged was a strangled gasp. Her hands flew to her neck, but there was nothing physically wrong, no injury, no mark. Yet her voice was completely gone. She couldn't speak. She couldn't even whisper. The weight of her terror grew heavier with each passing second. She couldn't understand how or why she was here, but the graveyard, the tombstone with Dr. Onyema's name, and the eerie silence surrounding her made her feel like she was trapped in some nightmare she couldn't wake up from. Frantically, she scanned the graveyard, looking for any sign of life. The stillness was deafening. Unable to stand the suffocating panic any longer, she turned and fled, running blindly through the graveyard until she reached the nearest street. Without thinking, she flagged down a taxi, her heart still hammering in her chest. The ride home was a blur. She couldn't speak, couldn't explain what had happened, but all she could think of was escaping, getting home, and hoping that somehow her nightmare would end. But deep down she feared this was only the beginning of something far worse. Otaniyen arrived home, her body trembling with fear and her mind in utter chaos. The taxi screeched to a halt outside her parents' house, and she stumbled out of the car, barely able to steady herself. The once familiar surroundings of her home now felt alien, as though everything was out of place. Her heart was still racing, and her throat felt tight, as if it were constricted by an invisible force. When she opened the door, her parents were already in the living room. Her mother, a woman who always wore an air of calm and poise, was sitting on the couch, stitching a piece of cloth, while her father was reading the newspaper. The moment they saw her, however, everything changed. They both stood up in shock. "Otaniyen, where have you been?" Her father's voice held concern. Her mother's eyes immediately darted to her. She could tell something was wrong. Otaniyen stood there, unable to answer, her throat dry, her mouth unable to produce any words. She tried to speak, but no sound came out. Panic surged within her as she struggled to make any noise, but her vocal cords were gone. Her mother rushed to her side, her face etched with worry. "Otaniyen, what happened to you? Where were you all night?" she asked, her voice soft but filled with anxiety. Her father moved closer, his expression turning serious. "We were worried. You didn't come home last night, and now you can't speak. What's going on?" His voice was firm, but it carried an edge of frustration. Otaniyen's silence only heightened their concern. They had always taught her to be open with them, to never hide things, and this strange behavior was a far cry from the daughter they knew. Desperation filled her chest as she grabbed a pen and paper, writing down her encounter with Dr. Onyema. She handed it to her mother, who quickly read the scrawled words, her expression changing from confusion to horror. Her father, who had been standing silently behind, read over her shoulder and gasped in disbelief. "You slept outside all night with a man you barely knew?" Her father's voice trembled with a mix of anger and concern. "This is not the way we raised you, Otaniyen. This is not what you should be doing to get money. You could have been hurt, or worse. Something worse could have happened." Otaniyen's mother wrapped her arms around her, holding her tightly. "We must find solution. But first, you need to know this isn't the way. There is no shortcut to respect, no matter how hard the pressure feels. You've put yourself in a dangerous position, and we won't let it continue." Otaniyen nodded, tears beginning to flow. She understood now. Her desire to impress, her obsession with money, had driven her to make choices that endangered her safety, and her parents had every right to be upset. But nothing could prepare her for what was coming next, the supernatural curse that had now taken hold of her, tying her fate to a ghost she had unknowingly invited into her life. As her mother comforted her, her father began to speak in low tones, making plans to help their daughter. They weren't going to let this go without a fight, and they would find a way to break whatever curse had stolen Otaniyen's voice. But the road ahead would be long, and the truth about the consequences of her decisions was only just beginning to unfold. Otaniyen's silence stretched on for days. Her parents, consumed with worry and frustration, tried everything they could to help her. They called every doctor they could find, hoping someone could explain why their daughter had suddenly lost her voice. But each visit to the clinic left them with more questions than answers. No one could understand what had happened to Otaniyen, and none of the prescribed remedies seemed to work. Her once vibrant spirit had been replaced by an overwhelming emptiness. The desperation in her parents' eyes only mirrored her own. One afternoon, after much discussion, her father suggested they seek out a spiritualist. He had heard rumors from an old friend about a powerful spiritual healer who could look beyond the physical realm and solve problems that medicine couldn't touch. Otaniyen, though deeply skeptical, had reached the point where she would try anything. She couldn't bear the thought of living the rest of her life unable to speak. Her parents made arrangements. Her mother made sure she carried all the gifts along as they set off to find the spiritualist. The journey to the healer was long and quiet. The sun was setting as they arrived at an old, weathered compound nestled on the edge of the city, surrounded by thick trees. The air was thick with the scent of incense and herbs, and the walls of the compound were lined with mystical symbols. Inside, the spiritualist was an elderly woman, her face etched with years of experience. She sat in a simple chair, her eyes piercing Otaniyen, as if she could see right through her. Without a word, the spiritualist motioned for Otaniyen to sit before her. She gazed at the young woman for a long moment, her eyes scanning every part of Otaniyen's being, as though reading a story only she could understand. Finally, she spoke in a low, almost rhythmic tone. "The root of your suffering is not in your body, but in your spirit," the spiritualist said, her voice as steady as the wind. "The ghost you encountered is tied to the gifts he gave you. Your voice has been taken as payment for the luxury you sought." Otaniyen's heart raced. Her worst fear was confirmed. This was not just some strange illness. She had unknowingly made a pact with a spirit, and the price was her voice. The spiritualist continued, her words heavy with the weight of truth. "To break this curse, you must return what was given to you. The items, the phone, the money, the designer gifts are not yours to keep. They were never meant for you." With trembling hands, Otaniyen reached into her bag and placed the iPhone, the cash, and the designer clothes she had bought with Dr. Onyema's money onto the spiritualist's altar. The woman sprinkled oil over the items, muttering incantations under her breath. Flames danced as the items were set alight, consumed by the fire. As the last piece of the phone burned to ash, Otaniyen felt a strange sensation in her throat. A tingling, almost electric feeling ran through her body. The weight that had settled there for days seemed to lift. When the fire died down, the spiritualist turned to Otaniyen with a knowing look. "Now, speak," she instructed. For the first time in days, Otaniyen opened her mouth, and words flowed from her lips, clear, strong, and unbroken. Her voice was back. Her parents embraced her, tears in their eyes. Otaniyen, overwhelmed with relief, could barely speak, but she managed to whisper, "Thank you." The spiritualist nodded, a quiet smile forming on her lips. "Remember this, child. There is no shortcut to true wealth. What you seek must come from within, not from the things that others have." Otaniyen's heart was filled with gratitude, but also with the deep understanding that the material desires she had once chased could never bring her the happiness she had been seeking. It was a lesson that would stay with her for the rest of her life. The Christmas season came and went without Otaniyen traveling to Benin. Her parents had been right to stop her, to guide her through the darkness she had almost fallen into. As the days passed, she slowly came to terms with the lessons she had learned the hard way. With her voice restored, she had found a deeper sense of peace. The need to impress her cousins and the pressure to live up to an image of wealth no longer consumed her. She no longer saw herself as lacking. Otaniyen understood now that true value was not measured by the material things one had, but by the integrity, love, and self-worth one carried. Though her cousins continued to live their glamorous lives, Otaniyen no longer felt envy when she saw their pictures or heard their stories. Instead, she felt a quiet strength within herself, knowing that she had learned to be content without relying on external validation. That Christmas, Otaniyen spent time with her family, really with them, not with her old insecurities. They laughed, told stories, and enjoyed each other's company. It was simple, but it was enough. As the year drew to a close, Otaniyen made a vow to never again let pressure or the desire for material wealth cloud her judgment. She was finally free, and she had her voice, both literally and figuratively, to prove it. True value isn't about material wealth or impressing others. The pressure to keep up with others, especially during Christmas, can lead us down harmful paths. Real success comes from being true to yourself and finding contentment with what you have. Instead of seeking approval through possessions, focus on self-acceptance. Have you ever felt pressured to live up to someone else's standards during the holidays? How did it affect you, and what did you learn from it? Share this story, like and subscribe for more.